You don't belong here, old woman. Your trembling hands can't even tie a kimono properly. We'll see who ends up on the floor in 14 seconds. What did you say? Do you even understand who you're talking to? I'm the state champion, and you're just a pathetic housewife who got lost. State champion? Interesting. But tell me, Kyle, have you ever fought a 5th-degree black belt who trained with the Gracie family in Brazil? Silence. Dead silence in the hall, where just a second ago there was thunderous laughter. The most interesting part is yet to come. Stay with us to find out how it all ended. But for now, like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. The elite martial arts academy, Iron Phoenix, in the heart of Beverly Hills, was a temple for the chosen. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, walls adorned with gold medals and trophies. This place breathed money and prestige. Here the children of Hollywood stars, heirs of oil magnates, and young entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley came to train. Membership cost $10,000 a month, and the waiting list stretched for years. Meredith Collins stood before the entrance to this citadel of elitism, clutching a worn sports bag in her hands. Her faded jeans and plain white t-shirt looked ridiculous against the backdrop of shiny sports cars parked at the entrance. Bentley, Ferrari, Lamborghini. Each car was worth more than she earned in several years working as a waitress in a small cafe in East Los Angeles. But Meredith had a reason to be here. A reason that burned in her heart every night, preventing her from sleeping. A reason that made her save every penny from her modest salary to pay for this one activity. 3 months ago, her 17-year-old daughter Emma took her own life. She left a note with just 3 words. They broke me. Emma was a talented girl, awarded a scholarship to a prestigious private school among the children of the wealthy. But instead of opportunities, she found only bullying, humiliation, and social rejection. Classmates tormented her for her poverty, for not having designer clothes, for having a mother who worked as a waitress. They created social media groups dedicated to humiliating her, filmed bullying videos, spread rumors, and when Emma tried to take up martial arts to defend herself, enrolling in a local jiu-jitsu class, those same kids from wealthy families came there to train and continued the bullying right on the mats. The coach, who received generous donations from their parents, turned a blind eye to what was happening. Emma lasted 6 months, and then she couldn't take it anymore. Meredith found a diary among her daughter's belongings where Emma detailed every humiliation, every mockery. She often mentioned Kyle Sterling, the son of a media mogul who led the bullying both at school and in the sports section. Handsome, popular, with impeccable technique and a collection of awards, he was the golden boy of the local martial arts community. And now Kyle was training here at Iron Phoenix. Meredith spent weeks figuring out his schedule, spent her last savings on a one-day membership. She had a plan she had been nurturing for 3 months, ever since the day she found her daughter's body. The automatic doors opened with a quiet hiss, and Meredith stepped into the cool marble lobby. Behind the reception desk sat a young blonde with flawless makeup and a smile that instantly became strained as she assessed the visitor's appearance. "Welcome to Iron Phoenix, Huawei," the girl said, clearly struggling to maintain professional politeness. "How can I help you?" "I signed up for a trial class." "Meredith Collins," Meredith replied, pulling a crumpled receipt from her wallet. The girl scanned the computer screen, and her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Ah, yes, found it. Although I must say, our classes are quite intense. Perhaps you should consider something more suitable for your age? We have wonderful yoga classes for older ladies." Meredith smiled. She was 43, but the constant work on her feet and long shifts at the cafe had aged her. Gray strands in her chestnut hair, wrinkles around her eyes, a tired gaze. She looked much older than her years. "Jiu-jitsu will be just fine," she replied calmly. In the locker room, Meredith changed into an old white guy she had bought at a thrift store. The fabric was soft from many washes, somewhat worn in places, but clean. She neatly tied the white belt, a symbol of a beginner, and looked at herself in the mirror. 18 years ago, she had been someone entirely different. Young, ambitious, talented, a promising athlete who trained in the best gyms in Brazil, learning techniques from legendary masters. She had been called the White Panther for her lightning-fast movements and deadly precision. But then that car accident happened. A concussion, fractures, months in the hospital. And when she physically recovered, it turned out her career was shattered. Sponsors had left. Opportunities vanished. She had to return to America, work to support her newborn daughter, who was left without a father. For 18 years, she hadn't competed professionally, but she had never completely stopped training. Every day after her shift at the cafe, she would come home and spend an hour working on techniques on a homemade dummy in the garage. Not for a career, just for her soul, to stay in shape. Emma sometimes watched, admiring her mother's grace, but Meredith never told her daughter about her past, ashamed of her shattered dreams. But now none of that mattered. What was important was justice for Emma. The training hall was enormous. The mats stretched over several hundred square meters, and the mirrored walls reflected the daylight pouring in from the panoramic windows. Along the walls stood punching bags, grappling dummies, and racks of various equipment. And everywhere they were, the golden youth of Los Angeles, boys and girls in immaculate GIs with embroidery and logos of expensive brands, with belts of different colors indicating their skill levels. They talked about their sports cars, weekend plans in Miami, and the latest purchases on Rodeo Drive. Meredith recognized him immediately. Kyle Sterling stood at the center of a group, telling some story that made the others laugh. 21 years old, golden hair, a perfect smile, athletic build. He wore a state-of-the-art GI worth several $1,000s, and the brown belt indicated a high level of skill. The very same Kyle who had driven her daughter to suicide. "Hey, look, Grandma has come to visit us," he said loudly, noticing Meredith. "Someone lost their way?" "The aqua aerobics class is one floor up." His friends laughed. A girl in a pink guy with a purple belt chimed in. "Seriously, lady, this isn't a place for people your age. You could get hurt here." "Look at that GI," added a guy with a blue belt. "It looks like it was dug out of a trash can. And those sneakers, my God, where did you find them? At a flea market." Meredith silently walked to the edge of the mat and began to warm up. She remembered every word from Emma's diary. She remembered how her daughter described moments like this: public humiliations, mockery over clothing, social rejection. "Mom, they're laughing at my sneakers. They say I wear poor people's shoes," Emma had written. "Kyle said that people like me don't belong among them, that I disgrace the whole gym by being there." Coach David Harrison, a former professional fighter with tattoos on his arms and a scar across his cheek, entered the hall and whistled to get everyone's attention. "All right, folks, we're starting training. Today we have a guest." He nodded toward Meredith. "Try not to kill the newbie on her first day." Kyle smirked. "Don't worry, Coach David. We'll be careful with Grandma." The next hour was a trial. Meredith was forced to work with the most aggressive partners, deliberately placed in humiliating situations, and constantly commented on every move she made. When she tried to execute basic techniques, more experienced students accidentally applied excessive force, causing her to fall face first onto the tatami. "Oh, sorry," Kyle said sarcastically after a particularly harsh throw. "I forgot I was dealing with a fragile lady. Maybe you should take up knitting instead." His friend, a girl in a pink GI named Tiffany, poured water from her bottle onto Meredith's gym bag. "Oh, how awkward, though that bag looked like trash anyway." "Listen, lady," said a guy with a blue belt, leaning towards Meredith during a break. "Do you not understand? You're not welcome here. This place is for serious athletes, for future champions, not for housewives who decided to play karate." Meredith remained silent, enduring, memorizing every word. In her head, her daughter's voice echoed, "Mom, they say I'm not worthy of breathing the same air as them, that my presence offends this dojo." By the end of the training session, the taunts reached a peak. Coach David, clearly entertained by what was happening, announced a sparring match. "Meredith," he addressed her with a smirk, "since you're so eager to fight, let's see what you're capable of." "Kyle, show our guest what real jiu-jitsu looks like." The crowd of students perked up. Phones appeared in hands ready to capture the humiliation. Kyle grinned widely, cracking his knuckles. "This will be quick," he told those around him. "I'll bet $20 she'll tap out in 5 seconds. 10 seconds, Tiffany interjected. "She looks pretty stubborn." "Maybe we should call an ambulance in advance," joked the guy with the blue belt, and the room erupted in laughter. Meredith silently stepped into the center of the tatami. Her heart beat steadily, her breathing calm. She had waited 25 years for this moment. She hadn't known then that she was waiting for it, but now everything fell into place. "Kyle," she said quietly, steel creeping into her voice. Before we start, I want to ask you a question. Do you remember a girl named Emma Collins? Kyle froze for a moment, something flickering in his eyes. Then he shrugged. I don't know any Emma. Now let's wrap this farce up. She studied at St. Michael's Academy. She attended a jiu-jitsu class in central Los Angeles. A beautiful girl with chestnut hair and green eyes. Kyle's face twitched. Now he remembered. Oh, that poor girl. What happened to her? I hope she finally realized that sports aren't for people like her. She's dead, Kyle. Meredith's words fell into the dojo like icy daggers. She hanged herself 3 months ago. She couldn't bear the constant humiliation from you and your friends. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the music playing through the speakers seemed to fade away. And what now? Kyle asked defiantly, though a hint of uncertainty crept into his voice. Are you her mother? Here for revenge? I came to teach you a lesson, Meredith replied calmly. A lesson your wealthy parents forgot to give you, that every action has consequences. Kyle laughed, but the laughter sounded strained. Seriously? You think you can do something to me? I'm the state champion, lady. I have a brown belt. And you're just a bitter housewife with a white belt. A brown belt, Meredith repeated, slowly untying her white belt. Impressive. Tell me, Kyle, how long have you been training? 8 years, he answered proudly. And in that time, I've won more tournaments than you've seen on TV. 8 years, Meredith nodded. The white belt fell onto the tatami. She bent down to her worn gym bag and pulled out a bundle of black fabric. The room gasped. It was a black belt. Not just a black belt. It had gold stripes indicating degrees. 5 stripes. 5th degree. 30 years, Meredith said quietly, tying the belt around her waist. I've been training for almost 30 years. I started at 14 in Brazil. I trained under Carlos Gracie personally. She was a world champion among women. Before the injury. Kyle paled. The other students recoiled, mouths agape in shock. They called me the White Panther, Meredith continued, tying her belt. You might have heard that name in documentaries about jiu-jitsu. Meredith the White Panther Collins. Coach David dropped his water bottle. He knew that name. Every serious fighter knew that name. A legend of women's jiu-jitsu who disappeared from the sport at the peak of her career. This is impossible, Kyle whispered. The White Panther is dead. Or very old. I'm 43, Meredith said, taking a fighting stance. Suddenly, her movements changed. The tired gait of a housewife vanished, along with the slumped shoulders and uncertainty. In their place emerged the grace of a predator, absolute confidence in every gesture. Now I will show you the difference between real mastery and the arrogance of a boy who thinks his daddy's money makes him invincible. Kyle tried to attack first, but his movements seemed slow and clumsy compared to what happened next. Meredith intercepted his attack, executed a classic judo throw, and in the next moment, Kyle found himself on his back. Meredith's hand gripping his throat in a chokehold. 14 seconds, she said calmly, looking at the stopwatch on the wall. That's how long it took me to take down the state champion. Kyle desperately slapped his hand on the mat, surrendering. His face turned red from lack of oxygen. Meredith held the grip for a few more seconds, looking him in the eyes. This is for my daughter, she whispered, so only he could hear. When she released him, Kyle gasped for air, coughing. The room was silent. Absolute silence. Meredith stood up, brushed off her GI, and looked at the other students. There was a fire in her eyes that they had never seen before. Who else wants to learn respect? She asked. No one dared to respond. Tiffany, who just 5 minutes ago had mocked the grandma, now huddled against the wall, afraid to draw attention. The guy with the blue belt stared at the floor, not daring to lift his eyes. Do you know what real jiu-jitsu is? Meredith continued, addressing everyone present. It's not expensive Joe's and Daddy's money. It's discipline, respect, humility, protecting the weak, not humiliating them. She approached Tiffany, who shrank back in fear. Do you remember when you poured water on my bag? Meredith asked gently. Do you want to try doing it again? Tiffany shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. My daughter wrote in her diary about girls like you, Meredith continued, about girls who think their wealth gives them the right to humiliate others. She wrote about how you laughed at her clothes, how you publicly humiliated her in front of the whole class. I didn't know, Tiffany whispered. Didn't know what? That poor people have feelings? That your words can hurt? Or didn't you know that one day you would have to answer for everything? Meredith turned to Coach David, who stood frozen, unsure of what to say. And you, she said, her voice taking on an icy tone. You saw how they bullied my daughter. You saw and stayed silent. Because their parents pay you big money. Listen, David started. I couldn't. You could, Meredith interrupted him. You could have stood up and protected the child. You could have shown those spoiled boys what real values are. But instead, you turned your gym into a bullying ground. She stepped forward and David instinctively backed away. Do you know what the saddest part is? Meredith continued. Emma was talented, very talented. If she had been given a chance, she could have become a great athlete. But instead, you broke her spirit, trampled her dreams. Her voice trembled on the last words, and for the first time that day, Meredith showed her pain. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she quickly composed herself. Meanwhile, Kyle had gotten to his feet, massaging his throat. His face burned with shame and anger. Do you think this will change anything? He said angrily. Do you think your showboating will make us feel guilty? We did nothing criminal. If your daughter was so weak that she couldn't handle ordinary teasing, then that's her problem. Meredith slowly turned to him. There was something in her eyes that made everyone in the room shudder. Ordinary teasing? She repeated quietly. You call constant bullying, creating social media groups to humiliate her, spreading rumors and physical intimidation, ordinary teasing? She was a weakling, Kyle stubbornly continued. In our world, only the strong survive. Strong? Meredith laughed, but the laughter was more terrifying than any scream. You think you're strong? Let's see then. She took a fighting stance again. Let's have a real sparring match. No rules, no limits. Let's see how strong you are when your opponent can fight back. Kyle hesitated. On one hand, he was torn by anger and the desire to restore his reputation. On the other, he had just learned a lesson from this woman and understood that he could sustain even more serious injuries. What afraid? Meredith mocked. Where's your confidence? Or are you only brave when you're bullying defenseless kids? Pride took over. Kyle nodded. Fine, but when I break a few of your ribs, don't say I didn't warn you. The real fight began, and it was nothing like the spectators expected. Meredith moved like a dancer, smoothly, gracefully, but every movement was deadly precise. She toyed with Kyle like a cat with a mouse. She let him attack, then instantly countered, making him fall, spin, and grasp at air. Kyle was a good fighter for his level, but the difference in class was colossal. Meredith seemed to read his mind, predicting every move. She used his strength against him, turning each of his attacks into a trap. 5 minutes in, Kyle was breathing heavily, drenched in sweat. His kimono was torn in several places, and bruises appeared on his face. Meredith, however, looked as if she had just started warming up. Tired? She asked, not even out of breath. Want to give up? Never, Kyle rasped, trying to make one last desperate attack. Meredith intercepted his movement, executed a complex flip, and ended up behind him, wrapping her arms around his neck in a chokehold. This time she wasn't going to let go quickly. This is called a python hold, she said calmly, gradually increasing the pressure. In 30 seconds, you'll lose consciousness. One more minute after that, and you'll suffer irreversible brain damage. Kyle desperately tried to break free, but Meredith's arms were like steel vices. Give up, she whispered in his ear, just like my daughter gave up. Feel what it's like to be defenseless. Kyle slapped his hand on the mat, surrendering, but Meredith didn't let go. Please, he gasped. Let go. Emma asked too, Meredith said quietly. She asked you to leave her alone. She asked for a chance, but you didn't listen. Kyle's face began to turn blue. His eyes rolled back. Meredith, shouted Coach David. Enough! You're going to kill him! Meredith looked at him with a cold gaze. And so what? Wouldn't the world be a better place with one less sadist? But after a few seconds, she finally released Kyle. He collapsed onto the mat, gasping for air, coughing and sobbing. Why? He whispered when he could speak. Why didn't you kill me? Meredith squatted down next to him. Because I'm not like you, she said quietly. I don't take pleasure in the suffering of others, but I wanted you to feel at least a small part of what my daughter felt every day. She stood up and addressed everyone present. Listen to me carefully, she said. and there was a strength in her voice that compelled them to listen. Martial arts are not a way to assert yourself at the expense of the weak. This is the path of self-improvement, discipline, and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. She approached her bag and pulled out a photograph. A beautiful girl with chestnut hair and green eyes smiled from the card. "This is my daughter Emma," Meredith said, showing the photograph. She was 17. She had dreams, plans, a whole life ahead of her. "But you took all of that away with your cruelty," Tiffany cried. Several other students turned away, unable to look at the photograph. "She wanted to be a coach," Meredith continued. "She wanted to open her own martial arts school for children from low-income families. She wanted to give them what you took from her." Meredith put the photograph away and looked at Kyle, who was still sitting on the floor, pressing his hand to his throat. "You asked if this would change anything," she said. "Yes, it will, because now you know that every action has consequences, that the pain you inflict on others can come back to you tenfold." She began to gather her things. "Meredith," her coach David called to her. What will happen now?" Meredith turned to him. "And what should happen? Do you think I'm going to the police? To tell them how I beat up a group of young athletes?" She smirked. "No, this was justice, not revenge. A lesson, not punishment." She headed for the exit but paused at the threshold. "However," she said, not turning around, "if I find out that any of you continue to bully people, if I hear even one case of bullying in this gym, I will return, and next time, I won't be so merciful." The door slammed behind her, leaving the gym in absolute silence. Kyle slowly got to his feet. Everyone was looking at him, some with sympathy, some with judgment. His reputation as an unbeatable champion was shattered forever. Was she really the White Panther?" Tiffany whispered. Coach David nodded. "I checked online while you were fighting. Meredith Collins, world champion of 97 and 98, disappeared from the sport after a car accident in 99. 25 years, muttered the guy with the blue belt. 25 years she didn't step on the mat. And still, she wiped the floor with our best fighter." Kyle said nothing. He slowly walked to the locker room, each step feeling heavy. Not from physical pain, but from the realization of what he had done. In the locker room, he took out his phone and found articles online about Emma Collins' suicide. He read about the girl who received a scholarship to a prestigious school, but couldn't withstand the social pressure. He read comments from classmates who remembered her as kind, talented, but very vulnerable. And for the first time in many years, Kyle Sterling cried. Outside, Meredith got into her old Honda and sat for a while, resting her head on the steering wheel. The adrenaline was gradually fading, leaving behind emptiness. She had done what she planned. She taught a lesson to those who drove her daughter to death. But Emma wouldn't come back because of that. The pain in her heart didn't lessen. Meredith pulled out another photograph from the glove compartment. It was her with Emma at her high school graduation. They were both smiling, hugging, making plans for the future. "I avenged you, baby," she whispered. "I hope you can rest in peace now." She started the car and drove home to her small apartment in East Los Angeles. Tomorrow she had to go to work at the cafe, serving coffee and sandwiches, smiling at customers, pretending that life goes on. But something had changed. For 25 years, she had hidden her strength, been ashamed of her past, allowed the world to trample her. Today, for the first time in a quarter of a century, she felt like herself, the White Panther, a legend of martial arts. Perhaps it was time to stop hiding. And in the Iron Phoenix gym, training had not resumed. The students went home, each thinking about what had happened. Some with feelings of guilt, some with a new understanding of what true strength is. Kyle Sterling would never bully the weak again. The lesson that Meredith taught him stayed with him for a lifetime. He even created a charitable foundation in Emma Collins' name to help children facing bullying. But that's another story. The story of the White Panther who returned to protect the memory of her daughter became a legend in the combat circles of Los Angeles. It was said that she appeared where the strong hurt the weak. It was said that she was still somewhere nearby, ready to teach a lesson to those who had forgotten about honor and justice. And in this was a truth known only to Meredith Collins herself. A month later, she opened her own small martial arts school in her neighborhood. Free classes for children from low-income families. Special attention to those who were bullied at school. On the wall hung a photograph of a smiling girl with chestnut hair. Below it was a plaque. Emma Collins Martial Arts School. Here every child will find protection and support. And every day, putting on her white GI to work with the children, Meredith remembered the words her first teacher in Brazil once told her. True strength is not in defeating the strong. True strength is in protecting the weak. Emma would have been proud, but the story didn't end there. 6 months later, an unexpected visitor came to Meredith's school. Kyle Sterling stood at the door, holding a box in his hands. He had lost a lot of weight. His eyes were red, as if he hadn't slept for a long time. "Mrs. Collins," he said quietly, "can I talk to you?" Meredith nodded, gesturing for the children to continue their training on their own. "What do you want, Kyle?" He set the box on the floor and pulled out a stack of papers, photographs, notes. "This is everything I could find about your daughter. Photos from the school archive, grades, the papers she wrote. I wanted you to have this." Meredith took one of the photographs. Emma at a school event, a bit shy but smiling. "Why?" she asked. "Because I want her to be remembered not just as a victim. She was an amazing girl, smart, kind. I read her essays. She dreamed of making the world a better place." His voice trembled. I haven't slept well since that day. Every night I see her face. I realize I could have stopped it. I could have protected her instead of participating in the bullying." Meredith silently looked at him. "I created a foundation in her name," Kyle continued. "We've already helped 50 children who face bullying, but it's not enough. It will never be enough." "What do you want from me?" Meredith asked. "Forgiveness," he whispered. "I know I don't deserve it. I know nothing will bring your daughter back. But I've changed. I understand what I've done." Meredith was silent for a long time, looking at the photographs of her daughter. "Emma was a very kind child," she finally said. "She always believed that people could change for the better. Even after everything you did to her, she wrote in her diary that she hoped one day you would understand your mistakes." Kyle cried. "She was better than all of us," he sobbed. "Yes," Meredith agreed. "Much better." She extended her hand to him. "Emma would have forgiven you, so I forgive you too. But forgiveness is not forgetting. You must carry this burden for the rest of your life and use it to become better." Kyle squeezed her hand, still crying. "Thank you," he whispered. I will be worthy of this forgiveness. I promise." After he left, Meredith sat alone in the hall, sifting through the photographs of her daughter. In one of them, Emma was in a GI, with a white belt, proudly showing off her first medal. "You see, sweetheart," Meredith whispered, "you were right. People can change, even the worst of them." Outside, the sun was setting, painting the tatami in golden hues. The hall was quiet and peaceful. Meredith closed her eyes and for the first time in many months felt something resembling peace. Emma could finally rest in peace, and her mother could move on, helping other children avoid the fate of her daughter. The story ended, but the legacy continued. In every child who found confidence within the walls of Emma Collins School, in every instance where the strong defended the weak instead of humiliating them, in every person who remembered the lesson of the White Panther, that true strength comes not from the ability to inflict pain, but from the ability to prevent it. And somewhere in a parallel world, 17-year-old Emma Collins smiled, proud of her mother and how the world had changed after her passing. Because sometimes the greatest victories come not from the strength of fists, but from the strength of the heart. And the most important lessons are taught not through words, but by example. And the White Panther was hunting again. But now her prey was not opponents on the mat, but injustice, cruelty, and indifference. And she never stopped until she found her target. After all, every mother has a duty to her child, and that duty does not end even with death. But fate had prepared another blow for Meredith. A year after the school opened, Detective Michael Rodriguez came to her. A tall man with tired eyes and graying temples looked as if he bore the weight of all the unsolved cases in the city on his shoulders. "Mrs. Collins," he said, showing his badge, "I need to talk to you about your daughter." Meredith's heart skipped a beat. What happened to Emma? She has been dead for a year and a half. Yes, I know. But recently we arrested a man in another case, and he told us some circumstances surrounding your daughter's death. The detective pulled out a folder of documents. "You might want to sit down." Meredith sank into a chair, feeling the ground slip away beneath her feet. "The man we arrested is Bradley Sterling, the father of Kyle Sterling. He is accused of corruption and money laundering. In an attempt to get a lighter sentence, he started cooperating with the investigation. The detective opened the folder. According to his testimony, your daughter's death was not quite a suicide. The world around Meredith spun. What do you mean? Sterling Sr. learned that Emma was planning to sue the school and his son for systematic bullying. She had recordings, photographs, witnesses. The case could have cost the family millions in damages and ruined their reputation. The detective's voice lowered. According to him, he hired a private investigator to find compromising material on your daughter. This investigator, he infiltrated her social networks, her personal correspondence. He found information about her depression, about thoughts of suicide. Meredith felt nauseous. Then he created fake accounts and started sending Emma anonymous messages. He convinced her that she was worthless, that the world would be better off without her. He sent her links to methods of suicide, to forums where people discussed death. No, Meredith whispered. No, this is impossible. Sterling says he didn't want her dead. He just wanted to scare her, to silence her. But his plan worked too well. The detective handed her printouts of the messages. This is the correspondence between the private investigator and your daughter in the week before her death. Read it. Meredith took the sheets with trembling hands. What she read shattered her heart completely. Emma, do you really think anyone will miss you? Your mother works as a waitress. Do you think she wouldn't be happier without the burden of a failed daughter? Face the truth. You'll never be good enough for this world. There's a simple way to end the pain forever. Each message was a calculated blow to the psyche of a vulnerable teenager. Every word was carefully chosen to push Emma to the edge. They killed my daughter, Meredith whispered, and there was such pain in her voice that the detective turned away. They killed her just as surely as if they had pushed her off a roof. Mrs. Collins, I understand how hard this is. No! Meredith jumped up, crumpling the printouts in her hands. You don't understand. For a year and a half, I thought my daughter was weak, that she couldn't handle the difficulties. I blame myself for not being able to protect her. And it turns out they deliberately drove her to suicide. Tears of rage streamed down her cheeks. What will happen to them? What will happen to Sterling and his son? Senior Sterling will receive a reduced sentence for cooperating. The private detective has already disappeared. We are searching for him. And Kyle, technically, he wasn't involved in this specific part of the plan. So no one will be punished for my daughter's death? The detective sighed. Proving suicide coercion is very difficult, especially after so much time has passed. Meredith remained silent for a long time, clenching and unclenching her fists. Thank you for telling me the truth, she finally said. Now I know what to do. Mrs. Collins, the detective placed a hand on her shoulder. I understand how you feel, but don't do anything foolish. The law, Meredith turned to him, fire in her eyes. The law allowed a wealthy man to order the psychological murder of a 17-year-old girl and remain unpunished. What law are you talking about? The detective left, leaving Meredith alone with her fury and pain. She sat in the empty hall of her school, holding a photograph of Emma and feeling something dark and relentless growing inside her. In the evening, Kyle came to see her. He regularly visited the school, helped with the children, tried to atone for his guilt. But today, Meredith looked at him with different eyes. You knew, she said without preamble. Kyle paled. What are you talking about? That your father hired a detective, that they drove my daughter to suicide. I didn't know, he whispered. I swear I only found out about it today when my father called from prison. And what are you going to do about it? Kyle lowered his head. I don't know. I tried to contact the prosecutor, offered to testify against my father. But they said my testimony wouldn't help. I have no direct evidence. So your father will remain unpunished. Meredith, I understand how you feel. No, you don't, she exploded. You can't understand because your family is the one that kills other people's children for money and status. Kyle recoiled as if slapped. I'm not like him, he said quietly. You know I've changed. Changed? Meredith laughed bitterly. You think a few months of charity can atone for a contract killing? It wasn't a contract killing, it was murder, Meredith shouted, causing the windows to rattle. They killed my daughter just as if they shot her in the head. The only difference is that psychological bullets leave no trace, Kyle cried. What do you want from me? What can I do? I want justice, Meredith replied in an icy tone. I want your father to pay for what he did. But how? The law is on his side. Meredith looked at him with a long gaze. Then it's time to forget about the law. The next day, Meredith went to the prison where Bradley Sterling was held. The wealthy businessman, accustomed to commanding and buying everyone and everything, sat in an orange jumpsuit behind bulletproof glass. Mrs. Colin, he said, picking up the phone. A crooked smile was on his face. Finally, we meet in person. You ordered the murder of my daughter, Meredith said without preamble. Murder? Sterling laughed. I didn't kill anyone. Your daughter chose her own path. After your detective led her to that choice. Proving that is impossible. And my lawyer has already arranged a deal with the prosecution. I'll be out in 2 years at most. Sterling leaned closer to the glass. You know what's the funniest part? Your little girl was so pathetically weak. A few anonymous messages, and she was ready to hang herself. If it weren't for my detective, someone else would have driven her to it sooner or later. Meredith sat still, but a hurricane of rage raged inside her. You poor people are all the same, Sterling continued. You think the world owes you something, and when you face reality, you break immediately. You're right about one thing, Meredith said quietly. Reality can be cruel. She stood up. But you forgot one thing, Bradley. Sometimes the victims fight back. Sterling smirked. What are you going to do? Sue me? I have the best lawyers in the country. We'll see, Meredith said and hung up. The following weeks she spent preparing. She reached out to journalists who specialized in investigating corruption among the wealthy. She handed over all the documents the detective had given her, as well as her own records of Emma's harassment. Sterling was rich and influential, but Meredith had something he would never have: the truth and the willingness to fight for justice to the end. The first article was published in a major newspaper a month later. Media mogul ordered psychological assassination of a teenager. The story went viral instantly. Social media exploded with discussions. Hashtags in support of Emma became trending. Meredith gave interviews to several television channels, calmly and dignifiedly recounting what had happened to her daughter. Every word she spoke hit the mark. My daughter was killed just as surely as if she had been shot in the head, she said live on air. The only difference is that psychological bullets leave no traces. The public was outraged. The wealthy businessman who ordered the suicide of a 17-year-old girl to protect his son's reputation became a symbol of everything that was wrong with the justice system. Protests outside the prison, petitions demanding a review of the case, boycotts of Sterling's companies. The pressure grew every day. And then something happened that no one expected. A month after the media campaign began, Bradley Sterling, unable to withstand the public shame and horror of realizing what he had done, actually took his own life in his cell. He left a note confessing to driving the underage Emma Collins to suicide and asking for forgiveness from her mother. I didn't want her death, he wrote. I just wanted to scare her, to silence her. But I realized that I became a murderer. I can't live with this. Kyle came to Meredith on the day the news of his father's suicide broke in all the media. This is because of you, he said. Not an accusation, just a statement of fact. Meredith sat in her living room holding a photograph of Emma on her lap. I just told the truth to the journalists. People drew their own conclusions. Your father would never have killed himself if it weren't for the public pressure you created. Maybe he just couldn't bear the weight of realizing what he had done. Kyle sat down next to her. What now? He asked. You got your revenge. Do you feel better? Meredith was silent for a long time. No, she finally said. Revenge doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't fill the void in the heart. But now I know that justice has prevailed. What about me? Kyle asked. I'm also guilty of Emma's death. Meredith looked at him. You've changed. You're trying to atone for your guilt. Your father always believed he was right. Is that enough? It's not for me to decide. Emma was a very forgiving person. Perhaps she would have forgiven you too, Kyle cried. I miss her, he whispered. I know I have no right, but I often think about what she was like. Kind, smart. I destroyed something beautiful. Yes, you did, Meredith agreed. But now you have a chance to create something beautiful in return. She pointed to the children training in the gym. Each of these kids could become the next Emma. Your task is to make sure that doesn't happen. A year passed. Emma Collins' school grew. Now more than 100 children were involved. Kyle became one of the instructors, dedicating his life to fighting bullying. One day, a girl about 14 came to Meredith, red-haired, wearing glasses with bruises on her arms. "Are you the White Panther?" she quietly asked. "Where did you hear that name?" "On the internet. They say you protect children who are being bullied." Meredith looked at the bruises on the girl's arms. "What's your name?" "Sophie. Sophie Johnson." "Tell me what's going on, Sophie." And the girl told her, a story that Meredith had heard hundreds of times. Rich kids at school, systematic bullying, teachers' indifference, parents' despair. "I thought about bad things," Sophie whispered. "Sometimes it feels like that's the only way out." Meredith hugged the girl. "No," she said firmly. "That's not the way out. That's what your bullies want, for you to disappear. But we won't give them that satisfaction. What will you do?" "I'll teach you to defend yourself. And if necessary," Meredith smiled a cold smile, "I'll visit your school. I'll talk to your bullies." For the first time in many months, Sophie smiled. "Really? I promise." That evening, Meredith sat alone in the hall, as usual talking to a photograph of her daughter. "Do you see, sweetheart? Your death was not in vain. Every child we save is a piece of you that continues to live." She touched the photograph with her fingers. "I know you would want me to forgive and forget, but I can't. Some things are unforgivable. But I can make sure that no child goes through what you went through." Outside, the lights of Los Angeles burned, a vast city full of injustice and pain. But in one small hall in the east side, another fire burned, the fire of hope, protection, and a mother's love that is stronger than death. And as long as this fire burned, as long as the White Panther continued to hunt for justice, children could sleep peacefully, knowing that someone was protecting them. And somewhere in a parallel world, 17-year-old Emma Collins looked at her mother and took pride in what her pain had transformed into a strength that protects others. Because true love does not end with death. It transforms, becoming something greater, something indestructible. And in this lay Emma's final victory over those who tried to break her.